Thank you all that contributed this month. Myself with a woe tale, Judy Wong with all sorts of fun bulbs, Connie Levy with some interesting questions. Bart has a lot of goodies, and Robbie has a little problem that she needs help with. And Mark has a hell strip from heaven. Kristen with the beautiful, her is kind of in your hell strip too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Actually,
yes, it is. She has a beautiful hell strip too. Okay, so I'm coming up first. And my Mexican weeping bamboo is blooming. That's my tale of woe. It's a showcase in one of my corners. And it used to be like nice and lush and green. And then I noticed it was getting a little bit yellower and straw colored. And so these are the flowers. And I understand that they die when they are done blooming. However, I found this on Sound Marker's growers list that it was introduced in horticulture around 1958. And those plants flowered in the early 90s. So 58 to 93 is 35 years. And so from 93 to 2001, 2021 is only 27 years. So I should have 8 years more left, but I don't know. Anybody know anything more about that?
Do you happen to know, will they all die in the area? Is mine doomed?
My understanding is they do all the same seed.
Okay, good to know. Thanks for the warning.
I had heard that it's a worldwide phenomena, so that, you know, when some of the bamboos go, all the bamboos all around the world, you kind of think like, that's strange, all around the world.
Okay,
all right.
Long, you're up.
Okay, this is Caliriho involucrata, and it's known as the purple poppy mallow, and wine cups are other names. It's native to central United States and northern Mexico. It grows about 6 to 9 inches tall and about 3 feet wide, and mine is definitely heading out to 3+ feet wide. It's got a very long taproot and will tolerate heat and drought. Semi-deciduous, but it's full sun. It does need moderate water, and it is long-lived. It will bloom from May through September, and I've seen in certain places even longer than that. So what you do in the fall, though, is late fall, you cut it back to the base. And I'm growing it for the, I don't know, second or third time, because it didn't do well for me the first couple of times, but I think putting water in the bird bath seems to help it. And I did plant it, I think, late last fall. So it really did have a chance to get that deep taproot down. So it's doing very well in my garden this year.
I'm surprised you can grow it in Menlo Park. Because
Why?
I would think you're not warm enough there, but apparently you are now.
Yeah. We didn't used to be, you're right.
Yeah, I've had it for years, but it is waning now, so I'm sure it has a lifespan. I think I've had it for 20 years or something. And
oh, wow. That's a pretty good lifespan.
Well, you know, I have other plants that I've had for 35 years.
Well,
and they're not trees.
Yeah, but this blooms, so it is so floriferous.
I know.
I mean, it just blooms and blooms and blooms and blooms. So,
well, you know, it's related to hibiscus, right?
Oh, Lavatera, or no, not hibiscus.
Lavatera, it's all the Malvaceae. The wonderful joy of Zoom to me is that finally the plants that I love can be shown because they only bloom during the day.
Ah, okay.
And
Yeah, I know this. Yeah, you're right.
At night.
This close up at night. So I'm pleased. Anyway, it's blooming for me finally, or growing well for me finally.
Why do you think the bird bath helps? Because you're looking at it more?
Because my husband refills it every day. And so it gets a spritz. It gets a regular spritz.
Gets a little dribble there. Okay.
Yeah. This is a cute plant that we got when we went down to San Luis Obispo to look for Calicortis, but it was at the San Luis Obispo Arboretum, and I hadn't seen it before, but it's Leonotus Menthofolia. And the reason Menthofolia is that the leaves have a slightly minty smell. It's from South Africa. It's a subshrub, but it is evergreen perennial, and it blooms in the summer through fall. It is deer resistant, they say. I haven't tested it because I don't have deer in my garden. And it's nice. It's a little, it doesn't get a woody base like Leonotus leonorus does, but it grows about 3 feet by 4 feet high and wide. It does attract butterflies and hummers, and it's hardy down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's in full sun. It's still in the pot, so it needs well-drained soil, but it's a little smaller specimen, I guess, than the Leonotus leonorus. And like I said, the minty fragrance is kind of nice too. You can see the leaves are really frilly too, which is really different from Leonoris.
Is that flower typical on the right?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it might be the spherical one, but it's not, huh?
No, I don't think, no,
Okay.
no, it's not. That's
didn't
the
know.
typical
Thank you.
flower. And I thought I'd share a few pictures. I met up with Warren Roberts and actually Daisy Ma, I hope Daisy's here. And we went to view the lotus pond at William Land Park in Sacramento. I had been there a month or two earlier and the lotus were not in bloom, but boy, when we got there, they were in full bloom and it was spectacular. I'm talking about 3 or 4 swimming pools worth of lotus, and people were just there right and left taking photographs and just really enjoying it. But it was gorgeous. Daisy said she started from one plant 20 years ago, and there happened to be a crack in the kind of there's Daisy, and there was a crack, I guess, in the kind of 7-foot container that she planted it in, and that crack allowed it to spread, and now it's pretty incredible. We picked up Warren in winters, I guess, and took him with us, and he was enjoying himself. He's there with one of those beautiful, beautiful lotus. I have to tell you, she said they bloom all summer. If you find a coolish day in Sacramento, I highly recommend a drive over to see them. They're in kind of the southwestern part of Sacramento, so you don't have to go too far into town to get to that park. It's across from the zoo in that park, and just across the street from it is the WPA garden that Daisy cultivated for 20 some odd years that she worked for the city or county of Sacramento. And that's also very nice. Some real interesting plant materials there.
So whoever's maintaining it, the garden has continued her work?
She said it was a little bit hard to get someone that was qualified or that could actually manage the lotus pond, but I think she said they recently did hire somebody. She still volunteers 1 day a week
Wow.
at the garden. And so there's a cadre of volunteers that help with maintaining the WPA garden. Amazing.
Judy, how
Yeah.
long do you say they'll be in bloom?
She said they bloom all summer. You can see there are some seed heads there. There are some flowers there. She said, yeah, you'll see flowers, maybe big as flushes now, but she said they bloom till the end of summer. Yeah, we lucked out. It was a coolish day. It was like really low 80s we had the day we went. So that's the only thing about going to Sacramento.
I wonder if they harvest their lotus seed heads for the cut flower trade and make some.
No, I don't think so. She was saying that she was going to collect some seed for some botanist, and she was going to offer me some, but I have grown it from seed. It was pretty easy to grow from seed, but I had it in a small, maybe 2 foot, 20-inch wide thing, and I got it to bloom 2 years in a row, but very small flowers. And it died the 3rd year when I tried to clean out the container. And last but not least is a plant that I'm amazed that actually does grow well for me, Kristen, because this does need heat. I've seen it at the Atlanta Botanic Garden, but this is Glorioso Superba. It's also called the Gloriosa Rothschildiana. And let's see, what's another name? The flame flower. So this is a perennial rhizome. It's deciduous. It's not frost tolerant, so I do have to put it in a protected spot in wintertime. It is the national flower of Zimbabwe, and it grows to about 4 feet. I have it in a largish container, and it climbs using modified leaf tip tendrils. I don't know if you can see it on any of the leaves, but at the very tip, like the last ½ inch, they kind of curl around, and they'll, catch onto something and just pull themselves up. But it is a showy flower. This is the typical cultivar, but there's also one, I guess, in yellow. That's all yellow. And you can see the really extended stamens and the large anther that just, because the petals are reflexed, it really is showy. One thing to know if you want to grow it is this plant is poisonous. Every part, but especially the rhizome, is poisonous because it has high levels of colchicine, which is a toxic alloid, and it's particularly dangerous for cats, dogs, and horses. So if you have animals, I would not grow it.
I have tried growing that. I thought they were root hardy. So I tried growing it in the ground, but I don't think I gave it enough water anyway.
It does need quite a bit of water. Like I said, I saw it in Atlanta Botanic Garden, where I think it stays a little bit more humid. I was surprised. This is a rhizome that was at the Botanic Garden, and when I was volunteering there in the bulb area, we had it there for years and years. We never saw anything close to a bloom, but I brought it home when they closed the nursery, and it bloomed last year and this year. So I think it really likes the really hot spot that I have it in. So give it another try, Kristen. You know, I was very surprised to be able to bloom it.
Well, I was going to try it this year, but they skunked me on the delivery. They said they didn't have any.
Oh, do you know David Hermeyer?
I know the name. Yeah, he's
He's
doesn't
in.
know Hort.
I got another rhizome from him. So he has a greenhouse in San Francisco where he grows like a lot of kind of tropical things. But so I have another rhizome, and so he may in the future have some more. They're very funny rhizomes. They're upside down V-shaped. So they have two legs. And I read somewhere that, you know, unscrupulous vendors will cut the rhizome in half and have two for the, you know, instead of just one. But I think it's stronger with the two legs.
I didn't know David Hermite. He was always very good on tech stuff. So I tapped him for that. And now I'm disappointed. I noticed Mark said that we should do a tour at your place, Judy, which I agree with him. But maybe we should also do a tour at David Hermeyer's.
Yeah, he does have a very nice garden. I've been there. So that might be something to ask him and see if he'd be willing to do that.
I think he was on the board, joined the board the first year I did that.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
He was on the board for a bit. You're right, Mark.
I think that's it. Oh,
Well,
mystery.
Connie has a problem plant she needs help with. Connie.
I cut back a Cape honeysuckle when I had my fence replaced, and this thing was growing under it. And it's ugly, rampant growth. And I'm curious what it is, but I really want to get rid of it.
No flowers at all?
Not yet.
Any ideas, anybody?
No.
She said square stems, so maybe it's a salvia.
Does it have a fragrance on the leaves?
Yeah, it's got a square stem and they're kind of purplish.
But does it have a fragrance, like a salvia fragrance or anything?
Not that I can tell.
Definitely opposite leaves.
It's hard to tell stuff from leaves.
Bart, where are you?
Yeah, I'm here, but how big is it?
It looks like it's growing out of a fairly big multiple trunks.
Huh. There were a couple of things that it kind of looks like, but again, there's not a lot of information there in the photo. It almost looks like one of those tuberous, it begins with I. The other thing I was thinking was Anradera, which was something that I had a horrible time trying to control and eliminate down south, but I didn't think it had square stems. The other thing does have square stems, and maybe by the end of the meeting, it will come to me what it is.
That rib stem looks kind of telltale too.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not Lamiaceae.
You know, the stems remind me of Swiss chard or something. Does that ring any bells?
Doesn't look like Swiss chard.
Yeah, not with that foliage.
It wouldn't have those big.
But the stems certainly do, kind of, huh?
Well, you said that it has a trunk, Connie?
Right. Yeah, they're fairly
So-
thick trunks, like about 3 inches thick.
So one of the tactics, now you may not like this and the group may not like this, but when I have a tree that is too hard to get rid of because of its location, like a sapling, what I do is I get a paintbrush and I cut the tree down as far as I can, and then I paint it with a Roundup. And so it just goes down into that plant to kill it off. That would be the only thing I could think of in terms of trying to get rid of it, but you'd have to cut it back to the trunk. And I don't know if you want to do it.
Isn't Roundup a foliar application?
No, if it gets to the phloem of the tree, it kills the tree off.
Yeah, if you paint it on, it'll suck it up.
Yep.
So she could use that.
Yeah, definitely. And that another one that works the same way If you don't want to use Roundup, is Garland.
Right. Arlon.
Sean mentioned maybe it's
Arlon,
or other trumpet vine.
I've
Does it
never
ever
seen-
flower?
It's been under your other thing though, right? It probably hasn't had any sun.
yeah, see, it was cut way back when I had the fence done. And then I thought this was part of the Cape honeysuckle. And then it started growing about a month later, it started putting out these stems out of this, the trunk that had been cut off.
Looks pretty rampant growing.
So it's pretty low to the ground now, but it's been, it just all of a sudden started putting out these stems from in all different directions.
My money is on Bart coming up with it before the end of the meeting.
Do you know if it grows by tendrils or the leaves twirl around, or I guess it looks like it has tendrils there, doesn't it? Kind of, sort of. I was just wondering how it climbed, if it has tendrils or if it's the stems twirl.
No, it just seems to come out straight from the trunk,
Okay. Everybody ponder that and see if we,
and the leaves tend to curl up.
you know how to get rid of it perhaps, but we still don't know what it is. So maybe it'll bloom for you. So we want more information next month, okay?
Okay, well, I'll take some more photos that might,
Or if it blooms or something.
and maybe as it grows, maybe it'll flower or something that will, be easier to identify.
Yeah. Okay, we got your Passiflora on here now.
I think, this is probably from Cal Hort, but I'm just amazed that it's making fruit.
And you thought it was Perite, that species?
Right. Yeah, I don't really know any more about it, but that was the label on it.
Oh, okay.
Well, Perite is orange, and it's the one that's very difficult to grow and flower, although there was, or maybe still is, one or two of them at Striving. There is the hybrid that's out there that's called, I think it's Oaklandia, that is supposed to be a hybrid between Perite and I think it was Melissima, but I'm not positive. I'm not a big passion vine person, but Perite is brilliant orange. It is unmistakable. There's nothing else like it.
I kind of found that when I was looking too, that it wasn't, that's why I put mixed maybe, but I did see that other one in there too. Beautiful. It's in a, it looks like a.
When I was trying to identify it, I went to several websites to try to identify it, and I couldn't find a picture that had the same pink color.
I did the same thing last night. I couldn't find it. I saw that the one that started the O, and the mix still looked kind of similar because that was quite of a variable one, but it's growing in a fig tree.
Right.
Nice.
It's curling itself up in the fig tree and the apple tree, and there are lots of flowers.
Okay, I think you have one more there, and then we'll maybe cut it off and do the rest after the presentation. This is the Justicia carnea.
This one, that's what I'm assuming it is. The Brazilian flame plant is also one of its names. It was here when I bought the house 20 years ago, so I don't really know that much about it. But it, I've made cuttings from it now. I have 3 plants, and it flowers regularly all summer.
Do you have it in full sun in San Francisco, or is it in part shade?
We get good afternoon sun if there is sun. So it gets, half a day of sun at best.
I understand it's fairly cold tolerant. Kristen, did you grow it in, were you able to overwinter it?
Yeah, I grow it, and it actually made it through the big freeze.
Wow. Did it go down to the ground and then just come back?
It was root hardy during the big freeze.
Oh, good. Okay.
But I don't grow it in full sun. I keep making cuttings trying
Grows
to find a new location, but well, yeah, but your sun, Connie, and my sun is a little different. We hit 94 today.
Ooh.
Absolutely.
I've grown this and I actually think that the kind of buds are much prettier. They look like little wood roses. I like it before it flowers or has any color in it. It looks like a wood rose. Does yours do that too?
Well, actually, I'm more interested in the flowers because I've got it in quite a bit of shade. I put it in the most protected area I possibly could when I planted it because I was told it was tropical and it would never grow. Mind you, it was survived when was the big freeze? 1990, 91. So I've had it a long time.
Aren't the buds kind of really dark and they look kind of?
You
like
have a different form than this one then, because there is one like that.
Okay. Okay.
That form was, I had a very hard time growing because that was not as cold hardy as this form.
Oh.
Show yours next month, Judy. I'd like to see it. I want to see your.
Oh, it's finished blooming, I think. Maybe there'll be another bloom later this fall, though.
I find if you deadhead them, they will repeat bloom.
Yeah.
I deadhead them constantly.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew this it came with my house in Upland in Southern California and was planted on the north side of the house. And that it just got direct sun really late in the day for a couple of hours. It flowered off and on all summer as long as it got some water. If it didn't get water, it dropped leaves and really looked bad, but was very, very easy to grow. And again, flowers profusely.
I actually had flowers at Christmas time on mine.
Really? In Danville? Wow.
Yes. Well, as I said, I think it's pretty cold hardy. It never froze to the ground than the big freeze. It gets damaged, but it never freezes to the ground. Never.
Yeah, mine in Upland never froze at all. And periodically I would get in and cut out some of the older woody stems. That seemed to help it.
Yeah, I think tip pruning is good for it too. But I think that's true of a lot of plants that get woody. If you tip prune it, it starts stimulating laterals.
Yeah.
My experience.
And more flowers.
Yep.
Well, that's always the goal for me.
We like that.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so Kristen, you're on.
Okay, I don't see it on the screen, but this is a
Oh,
Phlox
well.
Pilata Hybrid.
There.
And this is on my, what do you call it again, Mark? The street.
Heaven strip.
Hell strip, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think of it ever as being a hell strip.
No, it really isn't.
Well, I live in Danville, for those of you who don't know, which most of you do and like to make fun of me for. And it is very hot. The street is very hot. I took this picture early morning so that I could get a better picture of it. But normally it's in full sun all day long. And we've seen some hot days, although I don't think this is the hottest summer we've ever had because I've known others to be worse. But this plant can take a lot of heat. And I believe they come from central United States, although there are all kinds of phloxes in the United States. We even have a few native to California, but this is a hybrid paniculata. It is a midsummer bloomer. It's July. It blooms. It's been blooming like this for 2 weeks. It'll probably go on exactly like this for another 2 weeks. And then it will bloom sporadically. I do water 4 minutes every day, which nobody believes me, but it's overhead water. I have cut back, and this plant survived that during the last drought to only every other day at 5 minutes. I got myself under 1,000 gallons, and it moves. It's a perennial that kind of runs. I suppose if I gave it more water, it would really run. I have a white one in the back. You can, do you see my marker here? No, you don't, probably. There's a white one in the back that used to be more dominant, but this year, this one has become more dominant. I think it's a great plant for inland heat if you're willing to put some water on it, because it certainly is a heat. And if you fertilize it, I understand what you do is you deadhead the top and then you fertilize heavily and water it continuously and you get a second crop of flowers. I wouldn't recommend it at this time, but I've had flowers on this way into November, but that's all. Thank you.
It's gorgeous.
Okay. Robbie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Tell us about your metasequoia, your poor baby.
Well, brought it up from California and planted it about 2 years ago from a 5-gallon pot, and it was fine the first year, but I'm thinking that's from that dreadful heat wave we had a couple weeks ago, because all the tips are browning, but I'm hoping that's all it is. But if somebody else can tell me something else, I don't want to lose it.
Robbie, this is the one that's the deciduous one, right?
Yes,
I grew this in New Jersey, and actually the Japanese beetles denuded it. And no, and it came back. The deciduous ones seem to have more of a resilience because, you know, they don't, they lose their leaves naturally anyway. So all you've done is set them back.
Seems a bit early though for dropping its leaves.
Right, but I'm sure I don't remember. I mean, you guys were hitting 112 there, and as I understand it was dry heat. In New Jersey, we never hit 112, and it was like 90 or 95, but it was also very humid.
Wow.
And I'm sure that all plays a role because I don't think it comes from a dry area.
How long ago did the leaves leaf out? When did the leaves? How long have the leaves been out? I think up in Oregon they're still on the young side.
I think they come out in May.
The heat is likely all of a sudden gets really, really hot. Fresh young leaves, relatively young still. Tips.
We did not get near as hot as Portland and Northern Oregon. We had,
but it was sudden, correct?
Well, kind of central, little south of Medford. So we had a couple of days of triple digits, like 101, but then it dropped down to a nice cool 90. Oh boy.
Yeah.
They like a lot of water.
Yes. Well, we have plenty of water. We're not restricted on that, and we're right off a river, so we pump it up. But it's not lack of water. I'm hoping it was that heat wave.
Well, is your climate drier right now?
No.
I mean, when you had the heat wave, did your humidity drop?
Yes.
Yeah, my bet it's about the humidity.
Yeah.
Especially if it showed up right after that.
We are pretty humid up here. I mean, not as much as Portland and Seattle area though. Does Bart notice anything on it?
Yeah, well, I think I know that it can take quite a bit of heat because there were 3 of them at Rancho Santa Ana in Claremont, which is quite dry, but all of them were planted next to water features, and that they can certainly take high temperatures. But again, Rancho, when I was there, got up to 115. But my guess is that what everyone else has been saying is correct. It was that the tree is young. It very likely is not fully established, and then it got too hot. If you're going to have conditions like that again, and it's still a small plant, I would say put in a couple of pieces or several pieces of rebar around it and just put a sheet over it during the hot weather so that it's shaded, and then wet down the sheet a few times during the day just to keep humidity up. But I agree with what everyone else has been saying. It's most likely the suddenness of the heat and then just the extreme heat compared to what you normally get up there.
Is that your pond or is that water that down by the
that's
hill?
a little river
that
runs through. We can pump our water out of it.
Oh, nice.
We have 3 of them in my neighborhood in Berkeley, one in Willard Park that's kind of in a swampy, poorly drained area, and they're all doing fine. And the other 2 are in parking circles. As you drive, they slow you down. They're not parking circles, but traffic circles right by the Berkeley Bowl, and they're all doing really well. And in response to, I think it was Mike's question, they just leafed out about 3 weeks ago. I mean, it surprised me. They were bare until then.
Wow. And yeah, at that point, they're still a little tender. It's sensitive to, any type of, they're not hardened off really, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they're older, more established trees. They're not young.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that it's a UC Berkeley where the oldest ones are, and the Botanic Garden that were planted in, I believe it was 1948.
Yeah,
And that, as Richard said, they do want lots of water.
they're practically in the stream there.
Yeah. Yep. And that's
Right.
what they like.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I don't know how they work in these traffic circles, but presumably the city, when they put them in, must have provided water, they're underground somehow, but there's no visible watering going on. So,
Well, Berkeley is generally so cool and so foggy.
freezing cold, Bart.
What?
Freezing cold.
Yeah, well, so they're not getting that stressed and that,
Right, right.
as in the valley in Medford. I know
Yeah.
there's some fairly good sized ones out and around Orinda that seem to do very well with minimal amounts of water. But again, the new growth, the extreme heat, the suddenness of it, and that it's a very young tree still are all the factors that I would be thinking.
Okay. We'll just make sure we keep it well watered.
It's nice, little protective box you have it in there now. That's nice. Okay, thank you for sharing.
Thanks all.
Okay, it's hell strip time.
All right, that's my health.
That's a very nice looking hell strip, I must tell you.
That's not a hell strip. That's
But
a
it-
heaven strip.
But it's got some, I'm really happy with the way the yellow towering verbascum, which might be Olympicum, I'm not sure. It's
Looks
one
like
that she
it.
doesn't sell anymore, but I think it might be that.
Olympicum's
like
going up. She does have it available, so
Yeah,
Oh, she does? Yeah.
yeah.
my favorite verbascum.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is you get thousands of seedlings and they come up in the cracks and all over the place. But I find it easy enough to, hold them away with a little bladed thing. And I'm just, and the nice thing is, where you want them, and they will show up, and you just edit out all the ones you don't want. And so I'm not trying to keep them more than 1 year. I did that once, and it just, they look kind of ratty. So I just as soon start fresh every time. And this was blooming maybe a month ago. My memory isn't the best, but something like that. And the red flowering thing, the hummingbirds just love it.
Is that Dicliptora?
It is. Uh-huh.
Mm.
And I really like the foliage match between it and the verbascum. You can see it in that second photo on the right there.
That one? That one. Oh, that one.
Oh, the next one.
That one?
Nope, you skipped one. That one.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, those are the leaves of the verbascum. Isn't that a close color match for the
Yeah. Very.
yeah.
I thought that was a close up of the Dicliptora.
Uh-huh.
No, he's talking about the leaves.
I know. I
Yeah.
thought that
Oh, yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
just
yeah.
a close up of it with the other one in the background. Obviously not.
And you can kind of see the foliage in the behind the flower on the left. So yeah.
Nice.
So those are putting on, and this year some Linaria came up. It's what I have is sort of, let's see if you got a picture that shows it.
Here's the
there.
Linaria.
That last one. So I've created a couple of breaks for people to get in and out without destroying it. And so I've got in the middle there, some verbena, Linaria came up in between. So there I've got a couple of the, two rows of the yellow flowering verbascum, and then on the outside more of the red flowering. And this year I even let an echium come up on the along there, and because nobody's coming and going to work, nobody complained. It was, it wasn't a problem. But yeah, so there's some other things out there too. But I just like this is the second year I've done that combination. I just like the way they're performing. I wanted to shout them out.
Can you give us your address again so we can come by and look?
Absolutely. It's 21, should I? 2127. Well, I mean, hey, can't be anybody else that would hear this coming by that any worse than my neighborhood could produce. But so 2127 Bonar Street.
Thank you very much. It's beautiful. It's really gorgeous.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, and that Dicliptora, you can grow that anywhere. I'm actually surprised that it's flowering as heavily in your garden because again, it usually wants hot and dry.
You know, that's the hottest I can give it is right out there on the street. I think it's all the reflected heat off of the sidewalk and the asphalt probably. And I get good long afternoon sun, which is some of the most, you know, it's the hottest part of the day that we get some days in Berkeley.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I'm familiar with that plant.
And yeah, so I'm glad it's coming. I tell you, I had it in the side yard and the backyard, and I dug them up and I moved them out here, and they never did anything like this back there.
Yeah, it's you can oftentimes see it out in any of the Palm Springs, Indio, out there in the real hot desert.
Yeah.
And it does really well there too. So it's really got a remarkable range. And Kristen, is this something that you grow in Danville too? Because it will take cold.
Yeah, well, when I first grew it, I was not as well informed as I'm becoming right now. I was told, don't forget, everybody told me all the stuff I couldn't do when I first started out in this business. And so I tried to put it in a protected area, and there was a lot of shade, and it lingered for quite a while, but it finally just bit the dust. And I thought it was just because it didn't want to be in Danville, and I'm becoming enlightened right now.
Yeah, it should do great for you.
Yeah,
I imagine,
it survived the cold. It was never about the cold. It was about the shade for me, because I was told, you know, I learned not to listen to people anymore, but that only happened about 5 years ago. So
put it in your heaven strip.
My heaven strip is a little.
How wide is your heaven strip? Your heaven strip looks nicely wide. Like I remember up in Portland, like a 5-6 feet width or something like that.
No.
Oh, it just looks that way.
Well, maybe it is 4 to 5. Probably is, yeah, 4 to 5 feet.
Mine is closer to 3 feet than 4 feet, but somewhere in between.
Yeah. The problem is, you know, I like plants too much.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's for editing later, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I'll ever edit because it's harder for me to kill a plant than it is. I mourn every plant I lose still to this day. So.
Oh, well, I'm so good at it. I'm okay with it. I know it just means more retail therapy. So it's not the end of it.
I do a lot of that too, Mark.
I know you do. You're quite the role model. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything more about verbascum?
No, I just tried to get a close up to show the flower. That's all. Yeah. Oh, you made a nice one.
Bart O'Brien, you are on.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, what a color.
Nyvinia corymbosa. It's a rare plant from South Africa. Martin Grantham gave me this several years ago when he was actually moving out of San Francisco State and going to UC Santa Cruz Arboretum. And so I've gone by to visit him, and he had lots of Nyvinias, and he said, "Do you want one?" And I said, "Sure." And he gave me one that wasn't in bloom and said, "Who knows what the color will be?" Because some of them were in bloom at the time, and some were very pale, and some were very rich. Later, when I sent him this photo, or a photo like this a year or two ago, he said, "Wow, you got a good one."
That's brilliant color, yeah.
It is in the iris family. It's one of the few woody irises. You can see in the right-hand picture, for all intents and purposes, the fans of leaves are much like Cicericium bellum. They're right about that same size. And then the flowers come up in the middle. Some years it flowers very heavily over months and months. And some years it only produces 1 or 2 inflorescences. This year it's having a pretty good year, and there's lots more inflorescences coming that you can't even see in these photos. I have it in between my laundry room structure on the left and the house, and that is the wind tunnel because this faces the bay, and there's a garage across the street from me and then the ocean. And so the wind really can roar through this area. The plant on the right gets blown over sometimes, but the Nivinia never does. I think it likes all of the moisture in the air. I don't really do much with it other than water it. I do water it regularly. I think since I've had it, well, shortly after I got it from Martin, I repotted it into a large clay pot. And I think I've fertilized it once since then. I know that a lot of times these sorts of South African things don't want a lot of fertilizer. And again, Corymbosa is the rare one that gets tall. This one is almost as tall as me. So it's a nice size, and you can see toward the base of it, it's beginning to branch more, and the side branches are getting more and more woody. It's a wonderful little plant. I really like it.
What type of habitat does it grow in?
It's from the Cape zone, but it's, I believe, east of Cape Town, and it's in an area that is fairly wet, but it is in the Mediterranean zone.
Okay, but I mean, is it in sandy dune bluffs or?
No,
Or
kind of in Fynbos.
prairie?
Fynbos.
Okay.
Gorgeous.
Are you gonna have seeds that you can put in the seed exchange?
It does produce seeds, but they take forever to mature. And then it only does like 1 or 2 per flower. And that I'll be watching them and watching them and watching them, and then they disappear. And it's like a year later. So,
Somebody eating it?
So I've never been able to collect a seed, even though I walk by this plant every day, twice a day, at least. So I should really make a definite attempt to do that, because
Maybe you
this
could
is such a nice one.
Put some little net bags around it to try and catch them like you do with hellebores.
Yeah, yeah.
It's beautiful, beautiful,
It is.
beautiful.
Except, like I said, it's like 1 or 2 seeds per flower, and that not every flower sets seed. It's like 1 or 2 flowers per inflorescence that I've noticed.
It sounds like you don't have the right pollinators too.
Yeah, I probably, if I went out there with a paintbrush a few times, that would probably help. And I remember asking Martin about them at the time. I said, well, you know, with this structure and these beautiful flowers, you know, why don't you grow more of them and promote them even more? And he said, it's because they're so messy. And I said, what do you mean messy? And he said, they're always dropping those leaves. And I guess where I am with the wind as it is, I never see any leaves on the ground. I never even see them on the ground. I think they blow away. But it really is something you don't have to do anything with, or I don't, other than water.
Can you propagate it by those little fans?
I've never tried to, and I don't know. I should probably ask Martin. I'm sure he's either tried it or done it.
Sure.
This is Origeron O, and actually that should be Glaucus, Glaucus. And
Yeah,
again, Ellen, you do a great job with all of these
Really
things,
good.
making them look good. This I've been on this kind of rant for years about there's Erigeron WR and Erigeron glaucus Wayne Roderick. They're two incredibly different plants. They're both Waynes and they're both great garden plants, but they're entirely different. You can see the foliage in the back. It's very broad on Erigeron glaucus Wayne Roderick because it is a direct selection of the species, and it has these very, very, very deep purple ray flowers. The other one that's sometimes sold as Erigeron Wayne Roderick and sometimes even sold as Erigeron glaucus Wayne Roderick has much smaller individual flowers that have much longer ray flowers, and they're pink. And usually the inflorescence is multi-headed, so there's a whole bunch of them, and the foliage is very narrow and it's all basal. Once you go up the flower stem on WR, they're just really small linear things. And it's a hybrid that Wayne found way up north. That's definitely a hybrid between glaucus and another Erigeron. But this is just straight Erigeron glaucus, or the Seaside Daisy. Very easy to grow. It's not the best habit of plant, but it's really the only one with this intense flower color. I decided that, well, probably a year ago, that I was going to grow a whole bunch of these and have them for our plant sale. So I've been bulking it up here at the Botanic Garden, and they're doing well, but we don't know if we're having a plant sale yet or not. Whenever we do, there will be some of these in it.
Cal Hort is.
Yeah. Maybe I'll bring one or two over for the Cal Hort one.
Well, that trades him out. Okay.
Careful not to jinx us now. I hope we are.
Yes, I hope we do too.
Oops, cat's out of the bag. We have to now.
It's actually, this is not a vine. This is Mandevilla Hesperia. And that it's really native to Baja. And
Northwest, right?
What?
That's Northwest, right?
Well, yeah, except it's all the way down on the southern part of Baja. And I collected these seeds on the Gulf of California, Santa Catalina Island. It's very confusing to have Santa Catalina Island off of our Southern California coast, and there's a Santa Catalina Island off the east coast of Southern Baja California. So they're both very different islands. The Santa Catalina Island in the Gulf is frequently mentioned as one of the most beautiful islands, and it really is. This plant is found on it and on the adjacent mainland and on a number of the other southern Gulf of California islands. To my knowledge, it's not really ever been in cultivation.
Where isn't it?
It's spectacular. It's a shrub, and most of them that we saw, and I saw quite a few of them, were about, I think the tallest one was waist high. And again, the flowers are variable. I mean, that photo of the one on the left is one of my favorite ones. I have about 20 or so of these that I grew from seed collected on Catalina Island. It is moth pollinated. You can see in the big picture on the right, they have very, very long tubes, like many moth pollinated plants do. And that it's fragrant, like most. The one thing that was surprising, when the first one of these flowered last summer, I thought it was going to be night blooming. And so I stayed here at the garden I think until like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And it didn't ever really open up all the way. And I was very disappointed. And then also didn't know how long it would last, because a lot of things like the night blooming cactus and so on just last for the one night. This lasts for several days, and the flowers are somewhat waxy. Not as waxy as some other mandevillas, but still there's quite a bit of substance to them. It's a wonderful plant, has very beautiful foliage too. The foliage is about the size of a quarter, so not gigantic. The flowers are bigger than a silver dollar, and that some of them have really round leaflets, others are more sort of ovate to obovate. And again, the stems on this are up to about 2.5 feet long on the biggest ones now. They're about, what, 4 or 5 years old now. It took them several years to flower. Like I said, last year, just one bloom. This year, lots of them are blooming. And I've made 2 selected ones for, you know, bigger, fuller flowers. Some of them, the petals aren't as overlapping, and some of them have smaller flowers. But it's really a great plant. I took one home a year ago, and it made it through the winter okay. I deliberately left some of them outside, back toward the glass house here at the Botanic Garden. So not on the ground, 3 feet off the ground. And that all of them are alive, but they don't look happy. The ones that are really the best looking are the ones that are still in the propagation house. But I'm guessing that at my house in Point Richmond, I probably would be able to have them outside and they'd be just fine, 9 years out of 10. And with global warming, it'll probably be very happy. Who knows? But I'm surprised at how well they're blooming this year.
Bravo.
Is it hot on those islands, or do they have the same kind of maritime effect that we have up here?
No, they're very hot and dry.
Well, then I think, Bart, that you need to share one for experimentation in Danville. I really do.
Well, I think if you can probably keep it protected for its first winter, my guess is that it'll probably be root hardy most of the time.
Yeah, well, I can winter it over and then plant it out next spring. That's been my experience with tropical type plants. That's how I get a lot of them growing now without, even bromeliads are now, they become deciduous, but they come back every year now.
Yeah, and this thing, the island is very dry. When we saw these, they were not in flower. I noticed the seed pods. Being Apocynaceae, they're very distinctive seed pods. They're long and thin, and they're joined at the tip and then at the base. And then there's lots of air space in between. And they're very round. So they were very noticeable, and some of them were splitting open, so I knew the seeds were ripe. And they have those hairs on them like many Apocynaceae do. So they would float a little ways away from the parent plant. So yeah, and again, it was the size and sort of the shape of the leaf and the availability of seed that made me want to collect it. And then I figured out what it was much later.
Well, the other part is mandevillas are not eaten by deer, and I've been invaded by, not invaded, but I have now deer visiting my garden periodically.
They're hungry.
Yeah, I don't know anything about whether anything will eat it or not. So far, nothing's really eaten it. And we've had a number of—
Not in the greenhouse.
Yeah, as far as insects that go in and out, so far, nothing's really attacked it that I've noticed.
Well, isn't Apostanaceae includes Asclepiadaceae, right? I think. I'm right.
Yes, yeah.
So that all of those plants seem to be, the animals do not want to eat them.
Yeah, that's generally true. And even out on the island, well, there was nothing to eat them there. There were no, I believe on Catalina, there were no native mammals.
They probably died out because all the plants became impossible to eat and they had nothing.
Well, and it's so dry.
Yeah,
There are giant cacti there too.
yeah. Well, as I said,
Sure, I'll be happy to give you one. We're
Okay.
growing some from cuttings right now, just to see how easy or if that's possible. This is Calocortus rustvoldii. It's a relatively newly described species, and it's known from only a few places in LA and Ventura counties. And that it's named after Ed Rustvold, who lived in Berkeley and is a very notable grower of bulbs. And that and he passed away actually this past December. And he had actually been growing this and gave us some. And they flowered last year for the first time. And they're flowering again right now.
They're beautiful.
In the bulb bed by Juniper Lodge in the middle of the garden, the old bulb bed. It's very reminiscent of Calocortus obispoensis and somewhat reminiscent of Calocortus intermedius, Weedii intermedius. But it's sort of between the two of them in most characters. So it really doesn't fit with either of them. It is just a very interesting, beautiful small flower.
Bart, would you be willing to, I know you don't do Facebook, but this is really cool. And I would love to have this picture and describe it, at least with the name, and share it on Really Rare Plants, because this is just choice. This Really Rare Plants group that I started is just blowing my mind, and I did it as a self-serving thing. And at first I had to do all the work myself, but now people are beginning to do it, and I just feel like it's Christmas every day. It's just great because all the stuff I've never seen, it's like opening up a present every day.
I love the little hairs on this one.
Yeah, this is Hulsea algida. Many of you may know this plant from the High Sierra or the High Rocky Mountains. It is a true alpine. And again, this is it flowering here at the Botanic Garden right now. It came into bloom last week. You can see that bud off to the side. That one, actually, I just came in to do all of this tonight, so I didn't go out in the garden today. So it may be open now too. The interesting thing about this plant, or one of the many, is that it's a sunflower or sun follower. The flower will actually follow the sun through the day. And
like
that
flowers.
What? Yes. And that when the sun disappears, it will do what the middle shot is, which is it's beginning to fold up, and it will completely fold up for the night. And I'm sure that's to keep the seeds and the pollen drier and more protected from the cold. And then come morning, it opens again and angles to the east.
Wow.
So the whole plant is only about 4 inches tall, something like that. And the flower is over 1 inch wide. It is one of the most noticeable of the alpine flowers when in bloom. And you can see that just again on the middle photo, how densely covered all of those bracts are with silky hairs. The whole plant is, but it's most noticeable right there below the flowers themselves.
Got to get that backlit.
Yes, well, that's a little bit of a challenge. And so anyway, it's just a nice thing to be able to see at here in Berkeley. You know, we're what, at 700, 800
A lot less
feet?
than, yeah. A lot less.
Yeah, you don't have to go to over 9,500 feet to see it.
I find it fascinating that it'll survive in Berkeley.
Yeah, well, see, this is in our new crevice garden, and this is why I wanted to have one here. And Michael Euler, our gardener for this section, is an alpinist himself. I mean, he's up in the high Sierra a lot every summer, and that, and he's really gung-ho about adding as many of these unusual alpines as possible. So this is really the first year when this part's been done. This is in the main big part of the crevice garden. There's the 3 pieces. This is the central large one. And that it was only finished last July. And he's been collecting, knowing that this is going to be here, and he built it. So I'm not sure how old this plant is, but in this site, it's only been here for less than a year, and it's already flowering.
Do these plants that are in the crevice garden have really deep tap roots? Is that why they're the crevices work?
Yeah, well, it's actually, yes, on some of the other ones that I put in, one of them, I know how long the taproot is, or the main roots are, but that this actually, you see the material that it's in, this one, in the picture on the left, that's all a material called Utilite, and it's expanded shale, and we had it shipped here via railroad car from Utah, because the expanded shale that you used to be able to get here in the Bay Area, you can't get anymore. And that we wanted this material and not expanded clay for a variety of reasons. Ion exchange is the main one. I mean, both are equally good for drainage, but that, and then the whole point of having the crevice garden is that you can manipulate things on so many levels in a crevice garden. Michael has done different amounts of organic material. He's added some sand in some and other materials to grow the specific plants. And then it has just superb drainage, and that much of our crevice garden has crevices that are, some of them are over 5 feet deep before you get to the sand that underlays it. And so again, all of these things that that are tap-rooted and want very exceptionally good drainage are able to be accommodated. And then the whole point of putting the crevice garden where we put it was that it gets a lot of sun kind of midday and some sun in the morning, and then it gets almost full shade from about 2 o'clock onward at this time of the year. And it was, I didn't want our plants to overheat because again, at elevation, they want cool, they want sun, they want great air circulation. They don't want to be really, or most of them do not want to be really wet around the crown. And so all of this was taken into account when we did this and where we positioned it. And that so far, I would say it was all the correct thinking because it's working out so nicely.
Beautiful.
Michael's having a great time with it.
Is that grown from seed?
Yes. all of the plants that you're going to see from the crevice garden are grown from seed.
They were propagated in your house propagation?
Yes.
House?
Yep.
Thank you.
And this is Epilobium obcordatum, which is usually called rock fringe. And again, it's not uncommon up in the Sierra at fairly high elevations. It is a classic rock garden type plant, but that in the past, this really hasn't, well, this and the Hulsea have never been really grown and flowered here. Right now, Michael has, I think, 5 or 6 of these that are flowering right now. This one is my favorite one because the flowers are a bit richer colored and the petals are broader. And as you can see on the image on the left, it's very fine foliage and really hugs the ground. It oftentimes is found in rock crevices. That's why it's called, the rock fringe. And we've had really good success. I think I've shown photos of the Klamath range relative of this, Epilobium rigidum, which has even bigger flowers, but is also a just gorgeous rock garden plant. But it's from serpentine, so it's not in this display, it's in a different one. But both of them are among my favorite rock garden native plants. This is the one that I know how big the roots are, and I believe it's actually this one. This is one of our more unusual Heucheras or coral bells. Almost all of the coral bells that you see in California have pink, white, or reddish flowers, and this one is yellow. It used to be called Heuchera Duranii, and as such was an endemic to the White and Inyo mountain ranges. But that now that it's a synonym of parvifolia, which is found in the Rockies and other places. But I still refer to it as Duranii to make it very clear that these are the California ones and not from out of state. The plant actually is very small it's about the same size as most Heuchera elegans. So the foliage clump is maybe, 2-3 inches in height. And currently that plant is about, 5 inches across, I'd say. And it flowered early this spring, I believe in March. And the inflorescences got large, over 2 feet long. And then it just decided to start flowering again. So these photos were just taken last week. The reason I can tell you how long the roots are is because this plant was one of the ones that was planted first in the original small piece, the northernmost piece, and on the northern side. And then we had a flood from above, from the redwood section that came and washed out part of the edge of the new crevice garden. And this plant was totally exposed. When it was planted, the long roots were only about this long, but in just 6 months, they were over 1 foot in length.
Wow.
Following the rock crevices down. So again, the crevice garden is doing exactly what we were thinking it would and what we wanted it for. Because a lot of these plants, once they go down and hit the Berkeley clay, they don't like it. And so this is a great way of dealing with them. And again, I highly recommend it for anyone who's into small collector plants that need exacting conditions. And this is at my house. This is a very large flowering rhododendron but it's a very small plant. And yeah, Rhododendron Dalhousie Robotum is from the Himalaya at elevations over, I believe it's over 9,000 feet. And that they can be epiphytic or they can be found on, quote unquote, on the ground and rock outcrops, and frequently in colonies when they're by the rocks. Those flowers are about 6 inches long and open, they're about like this. They emerge and they're kind of that greenish yellow with those red stripes. The red stripes are actually on the outside of the floral tube, and that when you're seeing them head on there, you're seeing through the petal to the outside, and that's what gives it that stripy look. I've only had this plant for what, 2 years? It had these cone-like flower buds that were like this. There were 2 of them at the tips of both of those stems, and that I figured that they should bloom, you know, last year, but they never did. They just stayed there. And then it was this year that they finally decided to open. So
The same buds? Wow.
yeah, the same buds. They just sat there.
Takes a long time to make them big fat flowers.
Yeah, I guess so. And I had no idea what this plant would do, because how I ended up with this plant, I mean, it's a little bit of a short story. Many of you know that when Stribing, or San Francisco Botanic Garden, decided to redo their propagation house, that all of the stuff that had been living there got sold off at a couple of plant sales, one of which was during the pandemic. But anyway, one of our the garden's former staff and current volunteer, Kiamara Ludwig, had been doing stuff over at that garden as well. And she told me about it and said there were lots of Vireyas, which I'm interested in growing Vireyas. So I said, here's $75, get me whatever is interesting. And this was one of the things that she brought back for me. There were about 20 or 20 plus of all different sizes, from 2-inch pots to 4-inch pots, and whatnot. And that this is one of the last ones to actually bloom. But again, it's probably the most spectacular. Each of the inflorescences only had 4 flowers, and so they were crossed one another. And each flower lasted for about a week, except for this last flower, which is the flower on the right, has lasted much longer. It's still there. So this is probably well into its 2nd week. And that as the flowers age, they turn white. So the older they are, the whiter they get, and the red becomes even more red.
Oh,
Bart, how cold hardy is it?
Apparently there's no problem with cold hardy. It's they don't like heat. I looked this up in a number of references. I don't think it's very commonly grown, and certainly not outdoors.
I'd like to grow it.
But that the couple of places where I did find references to it having been grown, they did say that certain parts of California's coast can grow this successfully. And again, I didn't even know what it was until it flowered. And then it's obviously very clear what it is. And that the whole plant is only like 2 feet tall. And that I think even in the wild, they only get to, I think, a maximum of about 3 feet.
Were you on your back taking that picture then?
No, I have it. It's not in the ground. It's in a pot,
okay.
and it's up on one of my tables.
Okay,
And
okay.
so, and then it's by the Quince Tree, which is the thing on the left. And actually, I was wondering if maybe that's why it finally decided to bloom. I'd always been using the Quince Tree to give the Vareyas some shade, because I know that they don't like full hot sun here or at my garden in Point Richmond. So I decided I would cut off a few of the branches that were kind of in the way. And within 2 weeks of doing that, the flowers started opening. So that may have been it, or it may have just been it was finally ready to flower anyway. But you can see the leaves of it are fairly large. I mean, there isn't a picture of a full-size leaf in the photo. And that the references say it's frequently not a pretty plant. And it isn't a pretty plant, but it's a gorgeous flower.
Yeah.
Can you save some seed from that?
If it sets any,
They're usually heavily pollinated by bees.
yeah, I never saw anything visiting it, but again, I wasn't there all day by any stretch. But
Hey,
yes,
Bush.
if it does, I will certainly be happy to share some with you.
Thank you.
Is drainage important to account for as well? I mean, if it's epiphytic as well, does it need to drain very good?
Well, yeah, it's in a pot, and I don't water it excessively, but I water it once a week, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Again, I find a lot of the Vareyas don't really need that much water. I'm finding some of my older ones in bigger pots, I can go for over 2 weeks and not water them, and they're still fine.
So I don't know if you remember Michael Barkley.
Yes, I remember him.
How could you
Yeah,
forget him?
Well, there's that. But he told me that rhododendrons are all epiphytes and that they grow in the duff, not really in soil, and people plant them too deep, and that's the problem. And once I changed my paradigm about rhododendrons with regard to that and allow a lot of duff around them, they got very successful. There's still a water issue, and we're back to that problem right now. But I now grow them in pots, simply put like I do my hydrangeas, because they need more water, but they're also draining much better. And I just thought I would share that. But we're back to Varea type rhododendrons. So this is definitely not something that would work out here, right? At least
Yeah.
I've never tried. I have to say, I've never tried. You guys all convinced me that it was impossible. Maybe I should try.
Well, and that this is not a Varea.
I realize that, but it's from
Yeah.
the same part of the world.
Well, it's from the Himalaya, and the Vareas.
Oh, no, then it's not. It's not tropical.
No, it's not. So it like I said, it isn't the cold that takes it out. It apparently is the heat, because it's a high elevation
Right,
thing.
right.
But it may be possible, and that, when I was in grad school, I had a Varea rhododendron that I took with me, and even flowered it indoors. They're actually really durable and pretty drought tolerant when you come right down to it. Because again, thinking of the air in my apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building with this radiator heater, the air was incredibly dry, and the plant was fine. It would dry out and I would water it, and the water wasn't great quality. I mean, unlike here, the water quality is great.
Regarding the epiphytic nature discussion, here at Sonoma Hort for decades, planting directly in fir bark, small chips, and lava rock. That's it. And plants have been neglected for maybe a decade or more. We've got these 8-foot plants in like 5-gallon containers, and they look just fine.
Yeah, they're really durable things. I do think that many of us in the Bay Area can grow these things. Certainly, if there's a horrendous freeze, like happens every 20 some odd years, typically, or 30 years.
You still believe that'll happen?
One never knows. I mean, it's kind of like everyone says climate change means higher highs and lower lows, but and so I'm expecting at some point we will get another major freeze and I'll have to move everything into the laundry room.
Probably wider swings, mostly wider swings both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I do think though that many of us can grow these things if we want to. And
Well, you know, the rhodos up here in Oregon went through that heat wave just fine. I mean, they didn't show any ill effects from it.
Well, actually for Vireyas, we're one of the few areas in the country where you can grow them outside.
Yeah.
Because of our wonderful climate. They don't like a lot of heat, but they'll take heat as long as they're not in hot, direct sun, and they get watered periodically.
Yeah.
Mine are in pretty hot sun in the afternoon, so even with the warmer temperatures we've had, they seem
There's a
fine.
collector in Vallejo who has about 60 varieties of Vireyas, and they're outside next to his house, like a situation next to your washing house or whatever you called it. And the biggest problem with the Vireyas, though, is they get leggy. And if they're in pots, which they mostly are, they tip over too easily. The wind will knock them over, and then they won't get watered.
And you can't trim them too much or at all?
It all depends on which ones you've got. I mean, I can't remember the guy's name, but he used to be a gardener at Stribing, has set up a plot of them at his church on St. Mary's Avenue in the middle of San Francisco. And they're now mostly about, I don't know, 10 feet tall or something. And they're in a barky mixture growing in the ground.
Where's this church?
St. Mary's Avenue. It's a street that's 2 blocks long.
Yeah, well, and that
little garden tour.
Yeah, well, if you want to see some really impressive ones, I mean, at Lake Merritt, there's a spectacular group of them. And it's all in a shade house, but many of them are in the ground. Most of them are in the ground.
Yeah, that was established by all by one guy, Bill Moyles, who grew all those Vireyas and gave them to the city there and somebody thankfully is tending them.
Yeah, and that I did make cuttings of lots of Teds. And they've all rooted and I've potted them all up and now I have too many.
I like fragrant ones.
Yeah, there are some fragrant ones, but they're usually not the brilliant colored ones. They're ones like Jasminiflora and some of the others, but that Teds, of course, I don't know any of the names of any of them, and they're all likely hybrids. But I did grow a bunch of them, thinking that I would bring some of them into Cal Hort meetings for the plant sales or the plant drawing or whatever.
So next month, August 14th, and send in all your plant forum stuff, and earlier if you can. That makes it easier. I love that everybody's sharing. It's very much appreciated, and it makes it more interesting. We can share. And then, as we mentioned, Mike, who joined us tonight, next meeting, August 16th. Mark it on your calendars. You'll get notices.
Ellen, thank you again for doing this. You have been a savior.
Thank you,
You're
Ellen.
so good at it. You're so very, very good at it.
Thank you, Ellen.
Great. We like you doing it.
Yeah, we do.
We're very sincere. We sincerely love you, Ellen.
Yeah.
Don't
Just keep the love coming. And right back at you.
See you next month.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.